guys, it's Miss Sarah from the West Bank Club, and we're continuing our story of the dreadful fate of Jonathan York. Where we last left him, he was about to float into some spooky water to see if he could get the treasure. And let's see what happens now. There he is on the barrel. Happy thoughts, his brain reminded him. Happy thoughts, pink sunrises, the sound of summer leaves in the breeze, baby otters playing in the river. Something slithered along the barrel. The movement was slight, but this time Mr. York felt certain it was not just a reed. Happy thoughts, his brain squealed. Orange sunsets, fall apples, apple pie at Thanksgiving. Ripples appeared to the left of the barrel. Seconds later, they surfaced on the right. The thing, whatever it was circling him. The voice in his head now was a shriek. The song of cicadas in late spring, clear starry nights, punching Mr. Jones Smith smack dab in his ugly pug nose. Mr. Jones Smith had been Mr. York's manager at the Brockleport General Store for the last 3 years. He was the sort of supervisor who might make you reorganize the cereal aisle 1 week and then reorganize it back to what it originally was the next. Being of the mildest temperament, Mr. York had followed his lead without question. But now, strangely, the thought of belting his employer square in the sniffer was actually quite satisfying. The happiest thought he had had all night, actually. The ripples seemed to be slowing, so Mr. York ran the scene through his mind in great detail. He'd walk into the general store, and there would be Mr. Jones Smith behind his desk in the back office. Photos of his freckly sons in Little League attire on the wall. Mr. York would march up and, "Wait! This isn't meek, stuttering Mr. York. Oh, no. This is a slick, suave Mr. York, with arched eyebrows like Sean Connery. He would wind up and whoosh-pop old Jonesy Smitty right in the puss, which looked like something Dr. Seuss might have doodled on a day off. And then Mr. York would snap his fingers and say, "Grr." The barrel scraped against the shore of the island. Mr. York snapped out of his happy place and glanced over his shoulder. The water was flawless, not a ripple in sight. He had made it past the Firmganot. He crept onto solid ground and strained his eyes into the mist. A mass loomed before him. As he inched closer, he saw the cave's mouth. He tossed a pebble inside and heard it slink off another stone. He waited. Silence. No roars or bellows or fee-fi-foes. He tugged the hem of his vest and wished he had a collar to pop. Mr. York, the Mr. York of his fantasy, wore his collar to pop. "Here goes nothing," he whispered. He hoped it was nothing. It didn't take long to find the treasure chest. It was small and carelessly stashed behind a pile of yellow bones. He scooped it up, tucked to his arm, and turned to leave. And then the ground shook, like footsteps. Like the footsteps of a dinosaur movie. Like the footsteps you hear before an expendable character gets chomped. He froze, mid-step, hoping, praying he wasn't an expendable character. And then the cave's mouth was filled with a tremendous reptile. Mr. York had seen snappers before, heard tales of whoppers that could lop off fingers. But this put even the fishiest bait shop rumors to shame. It was Jagunda, as they say in Brockleport. Its arms twisted into gnarled plates and spikes, its neck fully extended. It was long and serpentine, yet thick like an old tree trunk. Its head dominated by terrible snapping jaws. The snapper clapped its beak. "And what do I detect?" it said in a surprisingly elegant voice. "A trespasser, I suspect? A thief? Quite probable, I deduce? Speak, wretch! Your name and purpose I demand." "My name is Jonathan York. Please, I mean you no harm, O mighty Terra Kingpin." Mr. York was stunned by the clarity of his own voice. "Ah, miserable stooge! You can only wish the Terra Kingpin was here in my stead. Were that the case, your life might be salvaged. But alas, he has been gone several nights, foraging on the far western side of the swamp. I am his mate, the Terra Queenpin, and if your bony legs fail to quake at the mere mention of my name, you must be mad." Mr. York smiled politely and gave a little bow. He figured his minutes were numbered, yet the Terra King or Queenpin seemed to enjoy hearing itself speak. "Though I am very afraid, Your Majesty, Terra Queenpin, I am also awed. I've traveled far and wide, yet I have never seen such an impressive specimen. The Terra Queenpin opened its beak and leaned close enough for Mr. York to see the pale yellow lining of its throat. Its limited facial muscles made its emotions hard to read, but Mr. York could sense it was pleased. "And I should not have expected you too. I am the pinnacle of power, the apex of awe. My armor impenetrable, my jaws devastational. Fear and admire me at once, puny mortal." Mr. York bobbed his head. "Oh, I do. I cannot even imagine a beast more phenomenal, except perhaps a dragon." The Terra Queenpin hissed. "Dragons, bah, worms. I am vastly superior to the most formidable dragon, I assure you. My armor is greater." "Indeed," agreed Mr. York, "although it's worth noting that some dragons have wings." "A trifle! I have no use for wings. They are flimsy and cumbersome. I favor swimming over flight." "As do I, but I have also heard that most dragons breathe fire." "And pray tell, what is this fire breath you speak of?" "Well, it's said that dragon fire is the most fantastic weapon on the planet. One exhalation can reduce an entire army to crispy bacon." The Terra Queenpin's beak clamped shut. Finally, it spoke again. "In that case, I can breathe fire as well." "Ah, I thought you might. I suppose a magnificent monster like you would be expected to know the secret of fire breath." "Affirmatively. However, in compliance with the oath of fire breathers, I am sworn to secrecy. Therefore, you must prove to me that you know the secret of fire breath before we can continue this dialogue." "It just so happens I do know the secret," said Mr. York. The Terra Queenpin's neck stretched forward. "Then speak it, wretch." Mr. York cupped a hand to his mouth. "The secret of fire breath is..." He stalled as his mind grappled for a solution. "Big rocks," he said at last. The Terra Queenpin nodded. "Ah, but what does one do with the big rocks? Prove to me that you know this." "Why, you swallow them, of course. Once they are in your belly, your stomach acid melts them down to magma they were made from, and your breath will turn to fire as a result." The Terra Queenpin's eyes sparkled. "Indubitably. Now, since you already know the secret, why not treat me to your fire-breathing display? Consider it my last request before you eat me." The Terra Queenpin fidgeted. "Oh, of course. I would, however, I've recently run out of belly magma, and I shall need to refuel." Mr. York shrugged. "No worries. There are plenty of boulders around." He pointed to a specifically hefty one near the back of the cave. "That should do the trick. Swallow it down, wait 10 minutes, and leave me dazzled. Unless you lack the fire breath talent, which, of course, would make you inferior to dragons." "Inferior? Me?" seized the Terra Queenpin. "Preposterous, slanderous. You want fire, miserable peon? I'll show you fire." The Terra Queenpin lunged at the boulder, opened its jaws to the fullest extent, and attempted to swallow the rock whole. But boulders are seldom swallowed so easily, not even by reptilian monsters. It took some creative maneuvering and an awful lot of croaking to squeeze the full quarry into its gullet. The boulder lodged partway down, and the Terra Queenpin started to choke. After a minute of gagging and a few more of hacking, It managed to vomit the boulder back up, and then, rasping for breath, it turned to snap Mr. York's head off, lest he spread word that the mighty Terra Queenpin's scourge of Half-Rock Swamp was inferior to even the puniest dragon. Of course, by this time, Mr. York was already halfway across the marsh, the test chuck snugly under his arm as he paddled the barrel to shore. And that's where we're going to stop with this installment of the dreadful case of Jonathan York. We can see that Mr. Jonathan York has gotten a little bit more confidence in him. So let's see how he ends this.